This video was originally an exclusive live stream for our Patreon supporters. If you'd like to become a Patreon supporter and get videos like this, as well as other panels and exclusive content, then check out the link to our Patreon in the description.
Without further ado, let me introduce our good friends of the channel who are joining us tonight for our discussion. We have the cool as a cucumber Nick Snape and the ray of sunshine that is Alethea Lyons. I'll get them to introduce themselves, but before we do that, we're going to be talking tonight about author collaboration. We're going to touch on co-authoring and writing with either with groups or with other writers. We're going to be talking about co-promotions, co-marketing, and the benefits that you can gain from that. So, Nick, to start us off, I'd just like to get a little bit of what your experience is with working with other authors, be it with writing, promoting, being in groups.
Well, basically, I'm a member of two different groups for writing and eventually an anthology that we did along the way. So basically, I was invited to join a multinational group called Ceres Station, and I worked with there's 5 or 6 of us on there, and that was an invite to actually have a look at the writing process and structure and how we did things, and that ended up with an anthology by the end of it. I was also invited into the creative commune along the way. That was, I think, probably contact with Spotlight Indie through your first session that took place in Shrewsbury, where I began to meet a few people there, and I ended up working with the creative commune to a degree. That's not, it's been two different styles in terms of approach, and we've done a lot of work across the board between the two in very different styles. One has led to an anthology, and one is and a lot of work around working one-to-one with different authors or working cross on different small pieces as well.
Fantastic. I'm going to come back with a couple of questions on that in a moment, but before I do, Alethea, do you want to give us a little bit of a roundup on what your experience of working with other writers is?
So I'm part of a couple of different writing groups as well, quite small ones. I'm in a writing coven, where we do a lot of beta reading for each other and a lot of kind of simultaneous editing of each other's work, where we'll literally be sitting there writing the same paragraph, trying to find the right words for it at the same time. So that's a lot of fun. And then I am part of a chaos group that we are co-writing a full-length novel, and also have it literally must be 1 million words at this point, at least, of co-written fan fiction of our own characters as well. And I've done a few short stories just as ad hoc things with friends.
I love the term chaos group. I think that absolutely encapsulates what most of these groups actually end up being. But I want to dive in a little bit into the idea of these groups, because there's a couple of different things that came out there. And I think between the three of us, have all probably got very different experiences of how different collaborative groups work. So some are very focused on the writing, some are very focused on promotions, some it is purely support. Nick, you mentioned, having two very different types of group. What do they kind of bring to you?
I think the first aspect, which is the Ceres Station, is mainly science fiction focused. So I work within the two genres, the sci-fi and the fantasy, because there's only two, honestly. And from that point of view, it's actually quite good to have a slightly different focus on that as well, and access to different people. But the Ceres Station was the first one that I joined, and I think that the process that I discovered was that I wasn't alone. To begin with, it was, I was very much the indie author working in the room on his own, obviously working with editors and other things along the way, but actually having that interaction about where my work was going, whether it be a paragraph level, chapter level, the entire story. There wasn't anyone there to feed back off, apart from those people who had been beta readers for me all the way along the way. And it was actually nice just to get a completely different view and an opinion on how I write, what I write in those areas. And that's not to say you're straitjacketed by that. It's more about opening up and being able to see, actually, oh, this is how it's perceived, this is how it's seen. And I think the biggest benefit of that has been that my writing has grown. I've always been able to take criticism along the way, but also been able to actually have the confidence to start giving that back as well, which is not something I'd ever done before. And that helps your writing in terms of seeing other people's work, how they've approached a similar type of theme or a similar type of approach. And that, if you like, enabled that confidence to grow, because I think a lot of it's about self-esteem. When I was first asked to join, it was like, what, me? You want my input into all of this? And you begin to realize actually that they're all in the same position as indie authors. They're all, I mean, they may have written a different number of books, but actually they haven't got a different number of manuscripts in the background. They've all written to a certain level. So it was that aspect to me which really helped me gain a confidence in what I was doing, and that yes, I had the potential to be able to put pen to paper and come up with something that people want to read, and gaining confidence from all of that. And also, I think the beta side of it gave me the ability to not only look at other people's work, but to have a different set of eyes to what I was used to on what I was writing, which was a fantastic point of development. And you could see, I could feel within myself the switch in terms of how you approach things. It was never at the level that Alethea was talking about in terms of we're all writing one novel and all those types of things together. It's I can understand the chaos in that. I can understand the actual output of that. It's going to be something amazing. But I think for me, this was the process actually that benefited the most in terms of that direction. And then from there, I think it's the creative economy, which I think is probably, I would argue, is probably more fantasy based. I was asked to join because I started talking to Phil about different things, and I haven't explored that as much yet. I think mainly because at this point I'm still in that sci-fi mode, and I know there's a switch to fantasy mode, and I'm hoping I can start tapping into people and asking the types of questions that will help. Because I haven't actually gone near that for a couple of years. So that's something I'm hoping to widen and develop while still contributing to bits and pieces along the way. So yeah, I mean, for me, it's been a real confidence builder. And I think it's been essential. There are moments in writing when you think, should I keep going? And I think that's been a big part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I can understand that completely, having had similar experiences. So, Alethea, from what you're saying, it sounds like what you're doing is quite different, and that is very much focused on the actual writing itself and collaborating together. So what have you found that you've taken from that as a benefit for you in your writing, your career?
I mean, that's been something that has, I think, been one of the keystones of it. It wouldn't be here without having had that. And I'm in some writing support groups as well, and we do a little bit of beta reading for each other. And so the promo, marketing, and moral support is fabulous. But actually having that experience of being co-writing with someone on a line level was, as you say, Nick, part of it's confidence building, I think, because you're working with someone who thinks that you have value, both that they want to spend their time helping you make your work better, and that they trust you with their work to say, I'm not sure this bit's quite working. Can we brainstorm it together? And all the people in my group are fantastic writers. And I've sat there many times being like, who, me, why, what? And they have all done the same. And this is kind of across indie and trad publishing. And we've all sat there and gone, why am I being allowed to do this? So there is that confidence of these people who I think are really cool and I admire, trust me to work with their words and are interested in what I'm doing. And did you say it gives you that extra perception as well that you can take back to your own editing? Because I think you do read things differently when you're reading with an editing mind. And it's one of the reasons I can read horror as a beta reader or to co-work on something, but I can't just read horror by someone I don't know because I'm a complete wuss. So I'm just like, nope, that's too scary. But with my editing head on, it kind of gives me that slight layer of difference so I can read horror. And my writing coven is entirely horror writers apart from me. So they have made my work a lot darker.
Yeah.
But there's just been lots of bits of going, Thea, you can make this worse.
I love that.
It's also just so much fun to be kind of live, either online on a video like this or just both in Google Docs or something at the same time, and being able to play off each other. And you'll see they'll start a sentence, you'll be like, oh, I can go somewhere with that. I've got an idea from that. Or sometimes we're both sitting there and you've got the sentence and you're like, that word is wrong. And there's 5 minutes of just typing in different words until someone goes, that word, that's the word. So there's a lot of fun with it, a lot of humor, even if we're writing really dark stuff.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think there's a lot to be said for it gives you that renewed sense of energy and purpose that sometimes it can, feel like that wanes a little bit. So having that person there that has that speed and that energy is great. And it sounds like we've all had really great experiences and different experiences. So what we like to do with these panels is we like to try and give practical advice that people can take away. Hopefully they can apply in their own writing world and career. So let's talk a little bit about the etiquette then that goes along with working with other authors, because there are good practices and there are bad practices as there are in anything. So let's talk a little bit first about how people can get involved with writing groups, because it does differ. You have closed groups, you have open groups, you have ones that are for specific projects, you have ones that are for specific genres. So I'm going to come to you first, Alethea. In your experience of groups, are there some do's and don'ts of approaching other writers?
Definitely. And I think it depends what you're approaching them for. Like, are you approaching them to say, can you do some editing or some beta reading on something for me? Are you approaching them to say, can we do some co-marketing? Or is it a full-on, I want to do a story, a novella, a novel, working together on it? And I think on the promoter side, it's much easier. There's a lot of authors who I have met either as one-offs or as kind of ongoing collaborations where we will promote each other's books. And we've read each other's books and enjoyed them. And we'll have like fangirl chatting, as it were, gender neutral fangirl chatting. And I think that's relatively straightforward. It's just a case of, I know this person, I really like their book. And it's almost that street team mentality, but on a one-to-one basis or in a small group. I think it can be more difficult to find people to fit in with if you're doing actual writing, because it has to be somebody who you're comfortable with. You need to make sure that they're somebody who you don't worry, are they going to plagiarize? Are they going to use AI? Are they going to steal my ideas? Because I have seen so many writing collaborations break down because someone has then gone and done too similar an idea. And there's then been a big fight of who had the idea first, who owns a creepy forest, or similar things. It's like, there can be things that are similar and there can be things that are copying. So I think you really have to make sure you're working with somebody that you trust, which will often mean that either you already know them or you've read their work and really liked it and you have someone in common that you know. So you might read something and think this would actually be someone who would be a really good collaborator for the kind of work that I do. But I think unless you know them or at least have a good introduction, it's very hard to go in cold to something like that. And I think it would be very difficult for someone to accept a complete stranger asking them.
Yeah, no cold calling is basically what we're saying.
Be friendly.
Yeah, exactly. Put the time in. Nick, what about you? What in your opinion are the faux pas to avoid when approaching these sorts of projects and groups?
I think it's, and I think Alethea was touching on it as you're going along. In terms of working with a group, I think it's understanding that your values are quite similar. Now, that's you can't. I'm not talking about politically or anything in terms of that. But I am talking about, the work that you're on, and what you're sharing and what you're working with is a collaborative project between you, and it's not the acceptance that it becomes someone's along the way. You're making that value choice to work together, and it might be at just line level, and it might be a whip level, it might be a whole anthology. But when you're making that agreement, there has to be a set of structural values that you share. Otherwise, it's going to break down, it's going to fall apart. I'm from an educational background. I'm very used to being under critique and giving critique, and being able to actually give the positive with the things that you feel needs to develop, and take that in return. And I think it's having an open group like that is essential. The ability where everybody understands that's actually where we all stand, and that you can make those connections. Now, I've only worked in smaller groups, so it's been easier to actually make that judgment along the way. Am I in the right place? Do they think that I'm in the right place as well on top of that? Because obviously I can have different values that they don't agree with. So it's I think in terms of how you approach different the group initially, you are going to be cautious when you first step into it. If you've been invited because you've made a lot of contact with one person, or you know them personally, or you've gone through the social media contact, that often is easier. And also on top of that, it depends on how the group approaches new members as well. You get a feel for how people are at that moment, when they're thinking, actually, we need to bring somebody else in with, an extra element of experience and knowledge, or the position that they're at, we feel that they could benefit us or we could benefit them. So it's taking those things carefully, and making sure that you're taking that step by step. And we've seen groups grow very, very fast, and it all breaks down very quickly. And you'll have seen groups that actually have grown very, very slowly, and for them it's evolved and it might work, but for others it's like, I need more than what's going on here. So it's just being gentle within that process and understanding your place within it. On an individual basis, it's like everything in life. You're taking a selective point of view. You have to be that gentle way in of finding out, actually, can I work with you? Are you able to give me what I need? Can I give you what you need? And it's exploring that, and actually it can be at different levels. We'll probably come on to this later, but I work with somebody who, in two very different styles. They do a lot of chapter by chapter alpha reading for me, whereas we flip that, and I do a lot of going through and looking at and editing for them. So we have two different things, but actually we give each other what we need to keep us going.
Because you can have different strengths, can't you? So it might be that you're good. Yeah. One person is really good at the overview and the continuity. Like, I'm very good at putting comments and things for people saying, weren't their eyes blue earlier? Or 3 pages ago, they were wearing something different. And I've got other friends who are very good at noticing different things. And it's finding that marriage so that you're covering different bases sometimes can be really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of what we're saying comes down to, when you approach these groups, is really knowing what you are going to be bringing to the group yourself, as well as what you're looking to get out of it. Because really the biggest faux pas that you can make is to go into one of these groups or collaborations for purely selfish reasons. That's not going to work, and it's going to become very apparent very quickly. Now, one of the ways that I think a lot of people get involved in collaborative projects from kind of the beginning is through anthologies, and I know, Nick, you mentioned doing some anthology work at the beginning there. So that's kind of a very different thing, because that's going in for a specific project. So if somebody is out there and they're looking to get involved with anthologies, what are some of the ways that they can get involved with that? Is it all by invite only, or do people take submissions? Alethea as well, if you've had experience in seeing these things come up as well, please do jump in.
I mean, in terms of that, there's 3 or 4 different ways that can happen. So if we take, if I push the one I've into the side, there are people out there who, if you look into the Facebook sci-fi groups and the fantasy groups and all those things, who are putting out for submissions on a regular basis, and looking for, and they'll send out a theme that they want you to pursue. They're obviously going to be quality control. They all have different ways of submission and what they're asking for, and there's obviously, they all have different etiquettes and how they want you to approach it. So they are out there. I've looked at 3 or 4 of them. I've been sent them by other authors and say, no, this is your type of thing. Do you want to have a go at this? You can also look at them in some of the Discord groups that goes on. Some of them are advertised in there. I'm not sure about Fanfly, but certainly there has been in the Sci-Fi Addicts, and there certainly has been in the British Fantasy Association, other places where people are putting out for submissions for those types of things. So you can keep an eye out for that and do it that way. You're up against an awful lot of people at that point in terms of submitting. And on top of that, obviously, there's the indie publishers, the smaller independent houses that are putting out for anthologies that will be heavily themed as well, which you'll find on social media. So they're all there. But if we're thinking about the sheer number of authors that are out there at the moment, there's a lot of competition for that as well. And obviously the things that are happening on social media at the moment is the big bulge at the moment of the number of anthologies that are coming out, of indie authors seeing the collective process within fantasy, within sci-fi, and across the board, who are getting together, who are doing anthologies at different levels. Some of them have got huge amounts of investment and have gone the Kickstarter route. And some of them have taken off, some of them haven't. And then you've got the other element who are just trying to get their stories out there, just want to be seen and don't want the other side of it. So there's a whole gamut out there of anthologies. How successful they are, I wonder if the sheer number has begun to erode all of that in terms of, if you like, selling success. But in terms of writing success and access and professional editing and interactive work and, you know, dual working in terms of short stories, I'm sure there's been a huge benefit for those people. My experience of anthology was very different. I was invited into the actual group itself, and then there was discussion that an anthology was perhaps on the cards. Now, I've never written a short story since I left school. It's not been my process, so I've needed the support to look at how to put together a short story. But actually, the anthology theme really interested me. I felt I could adapt my writing to it, and it was really the first step into seeing this whole gamut of styles that are very different to mine coming together and actually working as that group. So it was really, if you like, by invite that I ended up in an anthology. But on that one side of it, that's not a bad thing, because it allowed me to access to short stories, which I've never done before, support in putting them together, and also seeing how a variety of authors, just 6 or 7 of us, approached it in different ways, and how their stories evolved and how they were refined. So that's how I got access to the anthology in the first place. The other side of that is the different skills involved. So we had some of the writers are graphic artists, some of them have done Kickstarters before. So we did do a small Kickstarter to go with that to fund the hardback that we wanted to produce at the end of it all. So you've got all these people who've done things which I've never done, and it's just been such a maelstrom of experience that you're digging into and begin to actually know in the future, am I going to do a Kickstarter? Well, I know where to go now. I've got a hint of what it's like. I've got a hint of what can happen. Things like that, which actually, you know, build the confidence to have more of a go. But that's how I ended up in an anthology, purely by invite anyway.
So my anthologies, the stories that I've had anthologies have been mostly through indie press submissions. So finding things on places like Submission Grinder and social media, and then submitting stories to them. In some cases where I already had a relationship with the press, and others that were just cold submissions. I've been on the other side of that as well as a slush reader. And you can, if your story gets rejected, don't feel bad. We had 12 stories. We had 1,200 submissions. So we were rejecting some really great stories. But we could only take those 12, and it was really hard to narrow down 1,200 down to 12, even once you took out the ones that were obviously AI and other rubbish. So don't feel disheartened if you're going that route. It can be difficult, and it doesn't mean your story's bad. And like Nick was saying, I've seen quite a lot of the purely indie author anthologies coming around recently. The support group I'm in, the Secret Scribes, they put one out just before I joined. They're, like Nick was saying about size of Discord groups, they kind of keep it a reasonably small group so that it doesn't get too big and overwhelming. And they had someone leave, and I was invited to join because I already knew several of them. But I just missed the anthology, unfortunately. But those are also a lot of hard work. So if you are looking to go down that route and co-publish something with other authors off your own bat, you have to remember you've got to have the editing, the formatting, the covers, all things indie authors are aware of anyway. But it is a lot of work then trying to collaborate that between 10, 12 people and potentially do Kickstarters. So it's like you were saying before, you have to put a lot into these things to get something out of it. But as long as you're willing and happy to do that, it's really fun.
This has been a preview of one of our Patreon exclusive workshops. If you'd like to watch the rest of this workshop or find even more exclusive content on our Patreon, then the link is in the description.